The 12-6 elbow is perhaps the most controversial technique in MMA history.
A karate master come from a 12-6 and break a stack of bricks, and they just go, whoa. That technique's got to be banned.
Some think it's this deadly strike capable of shattering skulls, whereas others just feel that it's an elbow like any other. The 30-year debate has led to the elbow being legal, to being banned, all the way back to being legal again. And this arbitrary rule has caused one of the most controversial moments in UFC history.
How much more power you can get from that?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a dumb rule.
But now, the ban has been lifted. So why has this elbow been illegal for the majority of the UFC's existence? And what's changed? Simply put, the 12-6 elbow is one that goes from straight up to straight down. The name comes from a clock where an imaginary elbow goes from 12 o'clock to 6.
Fighters do not know a 12-6 elbow. For example, this is a 12-6 elbow. This and this alone.
And while most MMA fans will only recall the technique being an illegal one, in the early days of the UFC, the concept of a 12-6 elbow didn't even exist. At the time, the only real rules were no eye gouging or biting, so the angle at which someone throws an elbow definitely wasn't under any scrutiny. But the UFC's early years weren't easy. One of the biggest public criticisms was back in 1996 from the then US Senator John McCain.
John McCain, famously called the sport barbaric, like human cockfighting. How fair do you think the criticism was then?
I think it was very fair. We didn't disagree with McCain or any of the other people. The problem was with the old UFC was McCain came out and said, you can't put on these unregulated fights with no athletic commission or, making sure that the fighters are taken care of, the doctors, you're going through the proper medical testing.
To combat this negative stigma, the UFC needed to legitimize the sport and their brand. So just a few years later in 2000, the UFC came together with other organizations to create the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts. It was the holy grail for ruling, officiating, and referring MMA bouts. Within it, a lot of new rules became standardized. Things like verbally tapping out due to pain, how much time fighters have to recover from low blows, defining what a grounded fighter means, and so much more. But Rule 10 under the sections regarding fouls was the 12-6 elbow. The use of a linear, straight up, straight down elbow is prohibited. If a fighter throws it at any slight angle or with a slight difference to the arc, it's totally legal.
12-6, I came up with that there saying, all right, let me just make this clear then. So we're saying that my hand comes straight up and straight down. That's what's illegal. So 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. But if I'm in side control and I bring my arm like this, we're okay with it. And they go, yes.
And 1 to 7's okay?
1 to 7, 11:30 to, all that stuff.
Sort of. 11:30's pushing it.
You're pushing it.
So the question is, why was a rule as specific as the 12-6 elbow banned? When some of the prominent figureheads of MMA came together in 2000 to outline a definitive rule set, elbows altogether were at risk of being removed from the sport.
The people that were really talking the most was me and a doctor named Dom Coletta from New Jersey. He was brought in as the medical advisor for the state of New Jersey. And when it came to elbows, they tried to get rid of elbows.
But after Big John explained that it would lead to more boring fights and that elbows are part of many martial arts, the doctor from New Jersey conceded his position. Yet he had one specific elbow he wouldn't let slide, the 12-6. A fight he had seen earlier that year in New Jersey left him with a vendetta against that specific elbow.
Gan McGee, you remember, 6'11", at the time in this show, about 335 pounds. And he's fighting a guy named Brad Gabriel, who's 6'1", 210, 215 pounds. And Gan, Brad Gabriel is trying to get a hold of Gan just to survive. And Gan is taking his arm, and he's boom, 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 and he's bringing it straight down on top of Brad Gabriel's head. And then he gets his back and he does the same thing, like the old Brazilian style of bringing shots to the back of the head. And he goes, I can't have that.
Combined with the practice of more traditional martial arts, using the downwards elbow to break cinder blocks and wooden planks, and ultimately, the 12-6 was banned.
I've seen them break big blocks of ice like that. That's a dangerous elbow. We can't have that. And I started to combat it, and Lorenzo Fertitta looks at me and goes, John, let it go. It's stupid.
Wow.
And I go, yes, sir, boss. And I backed away from it. And so that became,
So that's the 12-6 elbow.
that's the 12-6 elbow.
Considering the fact that it's not a technique that would occur all that often, the MMA representatives just decided it wasn't worth the battle and let the 12-6 elbow go. In a sport where you can spin a wheel kick to the head, tear the ligaments of someone's leg with a heel hook, or break their arm with a kimura, a downwards elbow doesn't seem like the very worst technique in the sport. But despite everyone knowing it was stupid, the 12-6 elbow was made an illegal move.
Imagine if you had the option to either, all right, someone's head's right here. You can either go like this or you can go like this. How much more power you can get from that?
Yeah.
Like, it's such a fucking dumb rule.
That's the way it's been for over 20 years. And in that time, it's rarely been a topic of controversy, but the one time it did, it was major.
One defeat that was a disqualification that's 100% bullshit. He was on top of this guy, smashing him, beating the fuck out of him. But they said that he did 12-6 elbows, which are the dumbest fucking ever rule in MMA. Because what if it's 12:05?
On Jon Jones' record, that single loss, as many MMA fans know, is a disqualification due to a 12-6 elbow. He was winning the fight comfortably through a handful of downwards-looking elbows, and that was that. Some fans felt he broke the rules, therefore he deserved the punishment, whereas others believed he should have had a warning or lost the position before being DQ'd. But the positive that came from it was everyone realized how stupid the rule really was.
Most people don't even know what they are, and that includes fighters. Fighters do not know a 12-6 elbow. For example, this is a 12-6 elbow. This and this alone. There is no variation of that. And I'm hoping that you can really look at me and see what I'm talking about, because imagine that I'm in side control. So I go to what would be my 12 at that time, and I bring it back to the side of his head. Just for example, which would be the 6 at that time. No, it's not a 12-6 elbow.
And although Jon Jones' fight was all the way back in 2009, it added fuel to the fire of fans, fighters, and media members wanting this arbitrary rule to be removed. Unfortunately for the UFC and MMA though, it isn't as easy as saying, this rule sucks, let's just get rid of it tomorrow. Instead, the rule set is at the mercy of athletic state commissions, which essentially run as mini governments of their own. It takes a lot of meetings, time, working around red tape, and probably so many other unimaginable hurdles to get things changed. And that's the reason why, despite everyone knowing the 12-6 elbow isn't this deadly technique capable of caving someone's skull in, it's been a part of the UFC for over 20 years. But recently, that all changed. In 2024, the 12-6 elbow was officially made legal within the unified rules of mixed martial arts. The change was, of course, welcomed with open arms.
I actually cried the night that I got this.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, literally tears up in my eyes. But when I heard that it was legal again, I immediately started training the technique, and it opened up so many more options for elbows, and I think it just makes the sport more exciting.
But while it was, of course, an improvement to the sport, it also opened up a whole new controversy. All of a sudden, Jon Jones wanted his DQ loss to be removed from his record, and it instantly split the MMA world. One side felt that it should be scrapped, their reasoning being that the technique is no longer illegal, everyone knew it was dumb at the time, so let's just get rid of that loss and make Jon Jones undefeated.
You had an incompetent referee, a guy who we can all agree now, maybe I sounded like, an asshole back in the day, but now we can all look back and 100% say that a guy that was completely incompetent at a time when the Nevada State Athletic Commission was at its weakest, the guy who was running it was a zero. Mazzagatti should have never been in there, and the list goes on and on. And that thing should have been and should be overturned, and I've been fighting for it for years.
But the other side believes that because it was a banned elbow at the time, the decision should still stand. After all, if you broke the law and got fined, you wouldn't expect to be reimbursed by the government if that law changed 15 years later. And in the months since, there's been no real resolution to the Jon Jones debate. In the octagon though, we haven't seen too many instances of the 12-6 elbow being used. But it's evidence that MMA continues to grow, continues to develop, and continues to shake the last fragments of stigma that cling on to it. And on the topic of how MMA has developed, check out our video covering the most successful fighting styles throughout the entire history of the sport.